Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to another discussion video. So, today I wanted to go ahead and talk about a news that is actually kind of old, and by old I mean like a couple of weeks old. And that is the cancellation of Scalebound. I actually am disappointed by that. But it wasn't until I read news about why it was cancelled that I realized, okay, I think I can understand why. But even still, that was like one other game that Microsoft might have actually had me of actually wanting an Xbox One. Like, the only other one out there is Cuphead, and we don't even know when that thing's supposed to come out. But with Scalebound, it was actually looking really interesting. Like, the entire concept was basically just being able to ride on a dragon, fighting monsters and stuff like that, and then you fight a gigantic monster right in front of you and stuff. And it wasn't just that, but it also was multiplayer as well. And that right there is probably what was like one of the key turn-ons that a lot of people liked. Me personally, it didn't have to be, but it was an interesting take. Well, unfortunately, it got canceled because of it being too complicated, from what I've heard. And from what I was reading, it seemed like the original ideal was just that it was basically the main character and your dragon, and then that's it. There was no like online functionality. But it wasn't until they got a little bit in depth that they thought, okay, well, what if we did this? And they tried to do it, and they ran into an issue, being that of the frame rate. Apparently, whenever it goes full screen mode and you have multiple players on screen, it tends to lag on an unprecedented scale, to a point where I think it's probably like unpresentable at most. So that's why Microsoft decided to just cancel the project altogether. And the people who were making this game are the same people who did Bayonetta 2, along with other great titles, and they are Platinum Games. And hearing about this, it's interesting to hear that this was the one game that they wanted to work on the most. This was something that they created, and they wanted to build on it. And instead, they just ended up kind of like, as the phrase goes, bite more than they can chew. So it was just unfortunate that it got canceled altogether. But there's a reason why I'm actually wanting to talk about it now. And that was the simple fact that after hearing what my friend was telling me about, he said that it was canceled by Microsoft, not by Platinum Games. Meaning that it may have a chance to come back. And that sounds like it would be an excellent ideal. See, Platinum Games, they tend to make mistakes on their own. Sometimes they can push more than they should, and sometimes they don't push as hard. In this case, they were pushing too much for this one title that they really, really liked. And for some reason or another, it just ran into some issues and problems, and Microsoft was like, we can't handle this, we're shutting it down. So, even though Microsoft shut it down, that doesn't mean that it's permanently gone. There's a chance that Scalebound might come back. You don't really know. In fact, for all we know, Platinum Games may bring the ideal up with Sony and ask them, hey, we're wanting to make this into a game. We know it didn't work very well when we were signed contract with Microsoft, but we think we've got an idea of how we can fix the issues and how we could present it better. Would there be a way that you could sign off Scalebound for your console? And for one reason or another, they would probably say, yeah, let's do it. And then the project would be back on. They just need time to kind of fine-tune to see where they went off on and what they could have done to make the game a lot better. And in all honesty, when looking at it, it looks fantastic. But I can definitely see why it would be a problem to keep up with the game as it is. What with the fact that you've got 3 other players on screen, and then a giant monster on screen as well. I mean, have you seen this stuff? It's pretty insane. It's something that I actually liked. It was something that was very interesting, and I really, really, really wanted it to be passed to where that way it could have become a real game. And unfortunately, it got canceled. And like I said, that really disappointed me. But knowing that it could come back, knowing that it's not completely gone, that it was most likely shut down by Microsoft. It was not shut down by Platinum Games, which means Platinum Games can easily bring it back into the frame so long as they knew what they were doing and how to prevent that from happening and rebuild it again. If nothing else, they could have easily just shut down the online capability and just made it a single player game. That's not a bad issue. In fact, in all honesty, there's a lot more single player on the PlayStation system than there are on the Microsoft system. In fact, if you look at Microsoft titles, they're all mostly multiplayer. Not all of them, but some of them are. Like, there are very few single player games, and the majority of them are multiplayer. So, it makes sense for why they try to push for the online capability in order to most likely sell the game. But since that didn't work, if they got rid of the online capability and just instead worked on the core game itself, I'd say that they would have had a seller. I guarantee it probably would have sold better on the PlayStation than it would on the Xbox. But who knows, really, in all honesty. But the reason why I'm talking about this is that if people keep talking about these things, it has a chance to come back alive. Much like how Final Fantasy Versus 13 did, this game could also come back to life. And in all honesty, I really hope it does, because that means that the game in spirit is alive, and that the company of Platinum Games is trying to push for this, because this is something that they wanted. They wanted this project to come out, and instead they ended up pushing a little bit farther than they normally should. So maybe if they were to give a second chance, that instead of pushing so hard, that they would work on the core game itself, and rather try to add something onto it. Because the more you add on to that same project, the more complicated it can get. It happens to a lot of companies, a lot more than you think. So, all I'm saying is that if for some reason Scalebound does get picked up, it's more than likely going to be somebody else. Because I think Microsoft just decided to say no to it all, and they're not going to pick it back up. If they do, that's going to be a big surprise. But I think if Platinum Games is very careful and work secretly on this project, or maybe even take a break and then come back to it later on, maybe it might see the light of day someday. Who knows, really. But I just wanted to talk about that and just kind of see what you think. Because personally, I actually liked it. I liked the project altogether, but it kind of sucked that it got canceled in the end. But let me know what you think. Do you think this game deserves a second chance? Do you think that it deserves to come back as, instead of a multiplayer ideal, as a single player game like it could have been? Were you excited about this one? Did you care that it had online capability? I'd kind of like to know your opinions. That's personally my thought. But anyway though, I'll see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Take care, guys.